In the face of wars, famine, and disasters, a feudal lord finds himself with no options and makes a pact with demons to restore prosperity to his lands. However, after delivering his son in the pact, he did not expect the boy to grow up and return to reclaim his own body. On a rainy day, a woman is in labor with the help of her household servants. Meanwhile, her husband, Lord Dago, who has a mark in the shape of an X on his forehead, waits patiently outside, reminiscing about the past when he went to a place called the Hall of Hell. The man enters the place and meets a bald priest who quickly warns that by entering, he is renouncing Buddha and the gods in favor of demons, and thus he is treading the path of evil straight to hell. However, Dago claims they already live in hell, and the path of Buddha does not exist. Despite the old man's warnings, the man does not care and attacks him from behind. On the ground, the priest acknowledges that this world is a hell, and now, as he is about to lose his life, he will find salvation before he began to doubt Buddha. Before passing, he issues one last warning to the man not to follow the path of the demons, but it is too late. The man pleads with the demons, speaking of the scarcity and disasters that have plagued his lands and caused suffering to his people. He makes a pact offering anything for the protection of his lands and the rule of the country. Suddenly, a gust of wind extinguishes the candle and a lightning bolt strikes Dago's forehead amidst other electrical discharges that hit the area, forming the scar in the shape of an X. Back in the present, the baby is finally born, but then the same type of electrical discharge as before strikes the location and the child. The man goes to see what happened and realizes something terrible. The midwife tells him that the child is alive but has no limbs, eyes, nose, or skin. At this moment, Dago begins to laugh because he knows the pact has been accepted. He hands the child over to the midwife to dispose of, telling his wife that they can have another child to be a heir, despite the woman's pleas to keep the child even if it's just for her to perish in her arms. However, the man suddenly sees the statue of a saint that has lost its head. One of the servants explains that it happened when the lightning struck, and the midwife said she sacrificed herself for something. The midwife takes the baby to a river where some creature seems to be observing her. The woman realizes that the child wants to live, so she places it in a boat for fate to take care of. At that moment, the creature appears and devours the midwife, but then a bald, blind man appears, saying he smells something foul. From the handle of his string instrument, he pulls out a sword and defeats the creature with a single strike. In the boat, he senses the aura of the baby, which is not human, but not a ghost either. In fact, it has the scent of a curse, so the bald man leaves. 16 years later, a boy named Dororo is shown selling goods until a man appears, claiming the merchandise is his. Despite the boy's protests and lack of proof, the man and his gang accuse him of deceiving them by pretending to be hungry, and they hired him to watch over the merchandise. Now it's time for him to pay for it, but Dororo says it's their fault for being knave and that they should learn from him. When the man prepares to attack, the boy throws a pot in his face and runs away. Thinking he has escaped, Dororo finds a puppy by the river and hesitates to feed the animal, believing the little dog should be able to find its own food. Suddenly, the man appears and takes the puppy hostage, so the boy surrenders. He takes a beating as punishment, but doesn't let it go unanswered, throwing another stone at the leader's face. After getting beaten again, he throws another stone that makes the man's eye bleed. Now the man wants to eliminate the boy by the river, but one of the gang members sees a man standing on the bridge and comments that his face looks like a doll's and his eyes too. They ask the man if he has a problem, but he's not looking at them. In the distance, he sees something floating in the water that initially looks like trash, but turns out to be a monster that suddenly devours the entire gang. However, when it grabs Dororo, the man on the bridge removes an arm, revealing it's just a prosthetic covering a blade in place of a forearm. The man saves Dororo from danger and lures the creature onto the bridge. He removes the other prosthetic, now armed with two blades, while dodging the monster's attacks and proceeds to cut the bridge's structure. All of this is done to make the monster collapse along with the wooden structure, disintegrating into the water. Afterward, he goes to the wreckage of the bridge to retrieve the sword that had fallen. Dororo helps him put the prosthetics back on and realizes that everything on the man's face is fake, including his eyes and ears. The boy wonders how he does all this without seeing or hearing anything. Suddenly, the man starts trembling and drops his mask, revealing that he had no skin, but now his facial skin has reappeared. Far away, Dago senses something and goes to the Hall of Hell, where one of the statues is broken. Meanwhile, Dororo continues to follow the man, bombarding him with questions until he stops to fish with the blade arm. The boy offers to cook the fish. He builds a fire and the two of them eat. So far, the man hasn't said a word. The next day, Dororo takes him to a village he heard is suffering from monster attacks, hoping to make some money. He talks to Denkichi, the man substituting for the village chief, who has problems with his legs. Denkichi confirms they will reward them if they defeat the monster and invites the duo to sleep and eat at his house. They end up in a stable, which is better than sleeping in the cold and damp. At night, a creature with a giant head ringing a bell appears. Dororo gets scared, but the swordsman does nothing. The creature stops in front of them and then leaves, even though Dororo tries to make the man fight. However, no confrontation occurs. Then Denkichi appears, and the boy tells him they will deal with the monster the next day. The following day, they are taken to meet the village chief, Bandai, who Dororo finds very beautiful, but she seems to recognize the warrior who draws his blade intending to confront her. However, Dororo prevents him, as do the villagers who arrive, and the two of them are taken to a storage room. There they meet the blind old man, who Dororo recognizes as a kind of priest. He explains that he has met the swordsman before and reveals that both he and the warrior cannot see but perceive things with much greater precision. They can see the souls of living beings. In Dororo's case, it looks like a white flame. Suddenly, the swordsman and the old man feel something. A monster appears from an opening in the ground, which the man easily defeats. It turns out that this opening leads outside the location right in front of Bandai's house, and the priest explains that her soul has the color of blood, which is not a good sign. Bandai then turns into a mummy, becoming the tail of an even larger creature that was hidden. She engages the swordsman in combat, and even though she hits him with one of her hands, he manages to strike her eyes. At this moment, Denkichi appears and captures him in a net to let the demon escape. The man runs after it, while the priest confronts Denkichi for feeding the creature with travelers, but the man claims he did it to protect the village. In the forest, the monster manages to trap the man on the ground by throwing bamboo pieces at him, but it becomes distracted by the bell-ringing creature. When it realizes the swordsman is already in the air, making an aerial attack directly on his forehead. The monstrous part is eliminated, but Bandai rises from the bandages and also transforms into a demon. However, the warrior is not here to chat and quickly eliminates her too. The bell-ringing monster sounds its bell once more and disappears right where Dororo finds buried gold. Denkichi explains that this is the gold from the travelers who were devoured by Bandai. However, the bell continues to ring, tormenting the man. He says that this is the sound of the bell of the first traveler they caught. The three continue their journey until the swordsman stops to write his name in the sand, and the blind man identifies it with his hand, feeling the name Hyakimaru. Dororo is thrilled to finally learn this information. Suddenly, in the Hall of Hell, another statue breaks, and far away, Hyakimaru seems to feel intense pain. Afterward, the past is shown, where Dr. Jukai provides prosthetics for free to people in need, and his apprentice Kaname admires him greatly, especially since the doctor made a prosthetic leg for him when he was a child. Unfortunately, Kaname discovers that Jukai served Lord Shiba in the war years ago. When the doctor confesses that he committed atrocities in the war and tried to end his own life by jumping off a cliff, but fell into the sea and was rescued by a foreign boat, he explains that in the country of the people who saved him, he learned to make prosthetics. This is not redemption, but he now sees that there is still something he must do for people. Kaname becomes extremely resentful because he lost his parents in that war. He confronts the man, who is not concerned about his own life, but insists on finishing at least a prosthetic for a child he promised to help not long ago. After completing this work, Kaname leaves, leaving behind the prosthetic leg made by Jukai. Shortly afterward, the doctor finds the baby Hyakimaru on a boat and realizes he is still alive. 1 year later, Devo's wife finally gives birth to another boy, and 6 years later, Hyakimaru can move freely with Jukai's prosthetics. As time goes by, the man teaches the boy to fight, and as he grows, he becomes capable of facing various types of creatures. As he observes this evolution, Jukai realizes that, in addition to lacking normal senses, Hyakimaru also does not feel pain, so he doesn't experience fear either. One day, after defeating a demon, Hyakimaru starts trembling and his right leg grows in a matter of seconds. After that, Jukai realizes that the boy must embark on his own journey to reclaim his body, so Hyakimaru leaves. Back in the present, the priest explains to Dororo that someone must have made a pact with demons in exchange for his body, and the boy is outraged. Hyakimaru tries to pass by walking and almost steps on the fire. When he realizes it's hot, he attempts to step on it again, and Dororo pulls him away, revealing that this time he has regained the sense of pain, which he wouldn't have been happy about. For him, that sense could have been the last to return. On another day, Dororo and Hyakimaru are found by a woman named Ososhi near her house. She tries to talk to him, but Dororo explains that the guy is deaf. For some reason, Hyakimaru is standing in the rain. From the way the girl talks, Dororo concludes that she comes from a wealthy family, but the woman says that the past is in the past and now she's just a peddler. She also tells them that her brother went to war 5 years ago and hasn't returned yet, when a wounded man suddenly appears and Hyakimaru notices a distant red aura and rushes off. Dororo follows and they come across a massacre. Suddenly, a white-haired man tries to attack Hyakkimaru by surprise, but the young man manages to defend himself in time. He explains that he caused the massacre because his sword thirsted for blood, as it is a living and cursed sword. Dororo is skeptical, but the man resumes fighting with Hyakkimaru through the forest until they reach the edge of a cliff. There, Hyakkimaru defends himself from a sword strike using his prosthetic leg and then uses the blade on his arm to send both weapons flying. Afterward, the man throws himself off the cliff. Dororo arrives and notices that the prosthetic leg is missing, so he goes to search for it. He finds it stuck with the sword, and in an attempt to remove the sword from the leg, he triggers glowing marks and the boy's expression changes. Meanwhile, Osushi encounters the white-haired man and recognizes him as her brother. Then Hyakkimaru finds the leg, but Dororo and the sword have disappeared. The sword guides the boy until he encounters Hyakkimaru, who draws his own blade. From home, Osushi's brother senses the presence of the sword and is drawn to it despite his sister's pleas not to go. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru fights Dororo, who only defends himself until he manages to knock the sword away, freeing the boy from its control. However, now Hyakkimaru is exhausted. Then the man appears and takes the sword, and Hyakkimaru prepares to fight. They exchange several blows without injuring each other significantly. At that moment, Osushi hears her brother fighting and goes to the location, where the two warriors have stopped with their backs to each other. In the next move, the man attacks, but Hyakkimaru defends himself with his other arm's prosthetic and takes advantage of the opening to strike accurately. The man is defeated, and the sword breaks, revealing itself to be completely rusted. With this, Osushi can only cry in sadness, while Hyakkimaru once again regains something. His false ears fall to the ground, and he recovers his real ears along with his hearing, the first things he hears being the sound of the rain and Osushi's crying. In a short time, the noise starts to bother him. In the forest, he is disturbed by everything, the sounds of animals, the campfire, and even Dororo's voice. To try to help, Dororo ties a cloth around his head, covering his ears to muffle the sound. Suddenly, the young man notices a monster approaching, a flying creature that immediately starts to attack. Hyakkimaru fights back, but his hearing is hindering him, and he is hit several times, only managing to strike the creature a few times. When it seems hopeless, the old man from before reappears and easily defeats the creature. The next day, Hyakkimaru wakes up to the sound of a woman singing in the distance, and the priest notices. The young man follows the voice and its clear aura until he finds a woman by the river who realizes that he cannot see, but also sees that he is injured. Dororo arrives shortly after, and the woman named Mio takes the three of them to her house, which is a nearly ruined temple. There, the old man explains that the young man is having trouble adapting as he recovers his senses, while they try to lower his fever. Mayo introduces them to the children who live with her, most of whom have some kind of injury. They all lost their parents in the last war, and there are rumors of a new war starting. Then a boy named Takebo arrives and tells Mio to go to sleep while he helps the injured man. Later, the boy tells Dororo that Mayo works at night, serving the army that is on alert during that time due to the possibility of a conflict. Despite Takebo's disagreement because it's a dangerous idea, she is determined. Dororo then suggests following her to make sure she is safe. Sometime later, when Mayo returns from work, Hyakkimaru keeps pointing at her mouth, and Dororo understands that he wants her to sing because her voice is the only sound that doesn't bother him. So Mio starts singing again. At that moment, the old man arrives and says there is good and bad news. The good news is that he found a better and safer place for Mayo to live with the children, but the problem is that there is a demon in that place. Upon hearing this, Hyakkimaru immediately gets up to go there even though he is injured, and the old man accompanies him. Meanwhile, Mio tells Takebo that she will work even harder so that they can move. In this case, she will also work for the enemy army. Although Takebo disagrees because it's a dangerous idea, she is determined. Dororo then suggests following her to ensure her safety. A while later, Hyakkimaru and the priest arrive at the place where the demon has opened a hole in the ground and is making movements to slide more earth around it. The young man jumps from stone to stone to attack the creature, which looks like a giant cockroach. Hyakkimaru manages to strike it a few times, but the demon grabs his leg. Meanwhile, Dororo finds Mio and sees that her work is terrible. The samurai in the army are trying to take advantage of her. Hyakkimaru, on the other hand, has regained his voice but lost his right leg to the monster, so for the first time, he is screaming in pain. Traumatized by what he saw, Dororo rushes back until he finds the old man and the young man. He is shocked by the injury, but at least the young man has regained his voice. You can't have everything in life, can you? When Mayo arrives home the next day, Takebo notices that she is very tired and apparently injured, but she is more concerned about Hyakkimaru, and instead of resting, she tries to help treat his wounds. Later, the old man prepares to leave, and the only one who sees him is Dororo. He is not going to face the demon, but will pass nearby, knowing that Hyakkimaru will face the creature again soon. The next day, Hyakkimaru creates a wooden support for his leg, and the children are amazed when they see the blades on his arm for the first time, showing him some swords they found on the battlefield. Shortly afterward, the young man prepares to face the giant cockroach again, and this time he performs better. In addition, Dororo had followed him to try to stop him but arrived too late. The monster bites the wooden leg, but he had placed a blade inside it and uses it to finish off the demon. Now with his leg restored, Hyakkimaru returns with Dororo when they see smoke in the distance. They arrive at the temple and see soldiers attacking the children and Mio. The men saw her entering the enemy camp, so they eliminate her on suspicion of being a spy. One of them prepares to attack Dororo, but Hyakkimaru stops him with a violent cut. The other soldiers surround the young man, who listens to Mio trying to sing with her last breaths. This drives him completely insane, screaming like a madman and brutally attacking the soldiers, not giving them a chance to defend themselves, while Dororo watches in horror. Finally, the commander, already wounded, begs for mercy, but Hyakkimaru only calms down when Dororo, in an attempt to prevent his friend from becoming a cruel monster, holds him and shows him a bag of rice seeds that Mio had obtained. She and the children wanted to start a plantation. He embraces the girl and says his first word, Mio. After burying everyone, the two of them leave. On the way through the forest, they encounter a spider-like monster and a man trapped in its web. Hyakkimaru confronts the creature, but the spider traps him against a tree and leaves. Fortunately, they find a nearby village. In the village, one of the guards reports that villagers are disappearing, and logically, Dororo concludes that this is the work of that spider monster. The next day, the spider transforms into a woman and is found by a man who takes her home because she is unwell. He prepares food for her and treats her with great kindness. At night, Hyakkimaru and Dororo are almost giving up when they find the woman running away with the man. The boy recognizes the woman's voice, which is the same as the spider's voice, so he instructs the young man to catch her. However, the man with her explains that the people disappearing are because of him. He helps people escape from this place because the work there is oppressive, and he is also helping this woman because she is weak and sick. Then the guards arrive to take the man because they don't want to lose more workers from the city. The spider woman traps them in her web and drains their life energy. Hyakkimaru prepares to fight, but she traps him again and escapes with the man. When the couple arrives at a secret passage, they are discovered, and the man is hit by arrows from the guards. The spider woman becomes furious and attacks the men. When Hyakkimaru arrives with Dororo and sees her transforming back into a spider, he joins the fight. After a brief battle with the boy, she goes to the man, who explains that she doesn't kill her victims, only sucking enough life energy to survive. After she absorbs some of the man's energy, Hyakkimaru and Dororo let them go, and they also leave the village. Days later, approaching another village, they see men carrying a bride up the mountain. Suddenly, a boy wearing wolf skin shoots an arrow, but misses badly. Dororo then tries to stop him from shooting again, and the boy named Saru tells them that the bride is his sister and is being taken to marry a monster. When Dororo suggests that Hyakkimaru can help, Saru tells the story of a dark cloud that covers the village from time to time and devours people. But when they offer a bride as a sacrifice, the cloud takes the bride and goes away. This time, Saru's sister has been chosen. On top of the mountain, the two boys knock out the guards and Saru frees his sister. However, she reveals that she offered herself as a bride to prevent the monster from devouring the villagers. Shortly afterward, the cloud begins to appear, and it immediately pulls the two guards, dropping them to their deaths. Hyakkimaru gets ready, but as the entire cloud is part of the demon, he is surrounded by the red aura, so this time he is practically blind. Unfortunately, the monster appears as a giant centipede and devours Saru's sister. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru is more lost than a dog on moving day, but suddenly, a geyser of water creates an opening in the cloud, and the creature seems bothered by the sun, so it goes away. Later, the monster returns even larger, and Hyakkimaru starts using arrows to measure the distance to the creature by sound. With this, he manages to use his blade to strike one of the creature's eyes, but it is still alive. Dororo then uses a rope to tie himself to the creature and help Hyakkimaru locate the enemy by his voice. However, he gets hit by a stone and faints, so the young man starts shouting to wake the boy up. He manages to defend himself from a bite, and when Dororo wakes up, he helps Hyakkimaru again, this time hitting the other eye. Now blind, the monster climbs too high and exposes itself to the sun. But of course it won't be that easy because this centipede has two heads, and the other one appears and swallows the warrior. However, this was her biggest mistake as Hyakkimaru takes advantage of it to cut the demon from the inside, and the creature finally turns into ashes in the sun. Fortunately, Saru's sister was still alive inside the creature. At that moment, Hyakkimaru loses his false nose as his true nose grows, but now he suffers from the foul smell of the mountain gases. As they leave, Hyakkimaru finally utters his second word, Dororo, and this makes the boy very happy. Afterward, with his sense of smell restored, the young man goes around smelling everything he can, including Dororo, who seems a bit unwell. He ends up falling ill with a fever. Unable to get help, Hyakkimaru places the boy in the shade of a tree, where a nun appears and offers assistance. They take Dororo to the temple to treat the fever. After resting for a few days, they set off on their journey again. Meanwhile, Lord Daigo receives a messenger who tells the story of a limbless baby placed in the river and how a commander was recently wounded by an unknown person with prosthetic arms. What they didn't know was that Lord Daigo's second son, Tahomaru, was listening to this conversation. The man goes to the Hall of Hell and notices several broken statues, realizing that the child somehow survived and must be trying to reclaim his body. Demanding answers from the demons, the smoke from a small fire focus begins to show images of Hyakkimaru, indicating that he has grown up. Later, Tahomaru encounters Daigo and questions him about what he heard. His father does not respond, and when pressed, he says it's none of his concern. The boy then takes a walk around the lands and finds some villagers complaining about a monster in the lake, creating waves that turn into whirlpools, where the monster devours people, with many villagers already falling victim to it. So the young man makes a plan. He gathers the people and the guards to build a diversion next to the lake in gates as if it were a dam. After that, they use a boat as bait to lure the creature into the diversion, close the water intake, and open the outlet to dry the area. This way, the creature loses its aquatic advantage. Tahomaru and two more soldiers begin to attack the monster with their swords and arrows, achieving good results, especially the young man. However, just before delivering the final blow, the creature starts throwing stones at the dam until water starts flowing again. Tahomaru holds onto his sword stuck in the ground, and when all seems lost, Hyakkimaru suddenly appears and attacks the creature from above, inflicting impressive cuts. Before leaving, Tahomaru faces Hyakkimaru, unaware that he is his older brother. The young man goes to thank his brother, and Dororo explains that he is blind, which impresses both Tahomaru and the bodyguards. Dororo then mentions that Hyakkimaru has defeated many monsters despite being blind and demands a fee for their help, which the nobleman pays without question. Afterward, Dororo asks for directions to the nearest province, and Tahomaru points the way to a city still within the lands of Lord Daigo. Before they leave, Tahomaru asks the man's name, and he responds, Hyakkimaru. In the city, they overhear some men talking about the curse of Bamon, which is not only affecting the city but also Daigo's lands suffering from drought. Dororo asks about what they are talking about. Meanwhile, Tahomaru's bodyguards inform Lord Daigo about the blind and armless man they found and the stories of him defeating many demons, as well as how he easily defeated the lake monster. Daigo's wife starts crying upon hearing this. Later, Hyakkimaru and Dororo arrive at the site of the alleged curse, where there remains a wooden wall between Lord Daigo's lands and Asakura's lands. Suddenly, a boy named Sukeroku arrives and warns them not to cross that barrier because there are Asakura sentinels on the other side who eliminate anyone who crosses. When Dororo mentions that they are there to defeat the supposed monsters haunting the area, the boy explains that when those lands were invaded, they didn't allow him to cross back home, so he got separated from his parents. But he still wants to go back, so Dororo promises that Hyakkimaru will handle the monsters that appear at night so that Sukeroku can pass. At night, when the sentinels leave, the three return to the area and several spectral fox-shaped monsters suddenly appear. They start attacking, but Hyakkimaru defeats each one with a single blow. Suddenly, many more specters appear in the sky and begin to circle the area. Hyakkimaru drops his sword and starts fighting with the blades on his arms. Seeing that he is having some difficulty, Dororo starts helping by throwing stones at the specters. The battle is intense, and Sukeroku sees an opportunity to cross to the other side. When he runs, Dororo tries to help because it's dangerous to go alone, but he is knocked down by a specter, and Hyakkimaru appears to save him. With that, Dororo starts running again, and the remaining specters merge into a single nine-tailed demon fox, much larger. The creature fires energy blasts in the direction of the boy, who easily dodges them but is eventually pinned down by the fox. Dororo, in turn, finds Sukeroku, but he has been caught by Asakura guards. Hyakkimaru manages to push the demon up and strike a blow, but suddenly, several arrows hit the ground near the fox and it disappears into the sky like a frightened dog. The problem is that the arrows that saved the boy were fired by Lord Daigo's guards, who have just arrived and are facing his son after a long time. The man calls in a wickedly born monster and orders them to attack him. Hyakkimaru is forced to flee from the arrows and hide in the forest while reflecting on his father's words. In the meantime, Dororo is imprisoned with Sukeroku and other people in a cage, but he plans to escape through a hole in the ceiling. Unfortunately, a guard notices and gathers others to try to stop the boy, but Sukeroku does his best to hold the archer back, allowing the boy to escape through the hole and fall into the river below. Meanwhile, Tahomaru questions his mother, who finally confesses everything that happened. Lord Daigo arrives at that moment, saying that the boy doesn't understand how devastated the lands were before he made the pact with the demons. But the boy says that he didn't do it for the people, but for his own ambitions. However, the man considers that as a feudal lord, his desires are the desires of the people. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru appears on the roof of the adjacent building facing his family. The men gather and start attacking again, while Hyakkimaru only defends himself against the arrows. His mother calls him son, and he flees again. Tahomaru's bodyguards try to catch him, but the young man stops them. However, Daigo wants him eliminated, even though Tahomaru pleads for his brother. The man asks if Tahomaru wants the people to suffer again in these lands just to keep him innocent. In the forest, Hyakkimaru finds Dororo and tells him in his own way that he found his family, and that his mother called him son, which excites Dororo. Meanwhile, the Asakura army gathers the prisoners for an execution at Bammen, declaring the beginning of the war against Lord Daigo's people. Luckily, Sukeroku is not hit, and soon the armies start to battle. In the forest, the two hear the sounds of the battle and also notice the specters forming again. In the meantime, Tahomaru and his bodyguards also approach the battlefield, while the old priest realizes that the wheels of fate are beginning to turn. Daigo's wife also took a horse to go to a location. During the battle between the armies, the specters began to hit people and drove Asakura's army away. When Daigo's soldiers saw Hyakkimaru, the commander who attacked Mio's temple recognized him, and the guy almost lost his mind again. But Dororo held him again to prevent him from becoming a monster. At this moment, Tahomaru arrives, claiming to be Hyakkimaru's younger brother and saying that what their father did, sacrificing the boy for the prosperity of the people, was wrong. But now he recognizes it as a necessary sacrifice to protect these lands, and he doesn't want the lands to die. So Tahomaru himself is willing to eliminate his brother. Without further ado, the two engage in a fight, and Daigo is pleased with his son's decision. Meanwhile, Dororo tries to release Sukeroku, but the demon fox returns. In the battle, Hyakkimaru eventually gains the upper hand and wounds his brother's eye, then retreats to face the fox, which finally disappears, apparently absorbed by Bammen's wall. Suddenly, Daigo's wife arrives at the scene, holding the headless statue. She says she understands how hurt Hyakkimaru must be with all of them and asks for forgiveness for not being able to save him. She asks for forgiveness on behalf of the people for prospering at his sacrifice, but she doesn't want him to suffer alone. So the woman uses a dagger to offer her own soul to the demons. With this, Bammen takes on an even darker appearance, and Daigo orders the soldiers to retreat. As they flee, the wall collapses and Hyakkimaru and the boys narrowly escape. With the battlefield empty, a woman accompanied by some people appears, calling out for Sukeroku, whom he recognizes from a distance as his mother, who fortunately survived the invasion that day. Despite everything that has just happened, Dororo tells Hyakkimaru that he is not alone, and the two continue their journey. At that same moment, the old man appears and takes the statue with a green aura, which then disappears. A while after leaving Mr. Daigo's lands, Hyakkimaru and Dororo take a rest in a cave. Or rather, Dororo rests as it is revealed by the boy that the warrior has been hunting monsters tirelessly and doesn't want to rest at all. As they continue their journey, Dororo gathers information and convinces Hyakkimaru to go to a hot spring, using the excuse that a monster has been spotted nearby. On their way, they come across a small shack to rest. Dororo goes out to fetch firewood and fruits and tells Hyakkimaru to wait. Along the way, he encounters a waterfall and a giant faceless Buddha statue. Suddenly, a woman appears and the boy gets frightened, but this woman looks just like his mother. They go to the cabin and Hyakkimaru realizes that she is not a ghost but doesn't know she's a human. The woman introduces herself as Okaka and says that this is her home. She makes soup while narrating the story of the faceless Buddha. Long ago, there was a famous sculptor known for crafting Buddha statues with kind faces, but during the war, people wanted fierce-looking Fudo statues, so they abandoned the sculptor. He wanted revenge, so he started sculpting a Fudo on a large stone found near the waterfall, but he wanted to carve a magnificent face more beautiful than any he had ever made. The problem was that he could only carve faces he had seen before. For many years, he tried unsuccessfully, until he aged and died before completing his goal. After eating, Hyakkimaru falls asleep. Dororo finishes eating and asks if he can call Okaka mother in Japanese Oka-chan, so it's difficult for the boy not to confuse the words when addressing her. She allows it and Dororo becomes very happy, hugging her as he becomes drowsy. With that, Okaka reveals that she put a sleeping potion in the Fuban finishes, telling the sculptor's story. The statue was possessed by an evil spirit that wanted a face, so it revived the sculptor and forced him to bring humans to steal their faces. The truth is that Okaka is the sculptor and can see people's souls to change their faces and voices to please them. When Dororo wakes up, neither the woman nor Hyakkimaru is there anymore, so he heads towards the waterfall, where he finds Okaka carrying the bound man. The boy stumbles, but he gets up quickly to try to help his friend. The woman pushes him aside, but it doesn't work. Eventually, the warrior wakes up and uses the blade on his arm to free himself. There he sees the malicious aura of the statue, which uses its power to push him away and even wields a giant sword, nearly hitting him. However, Hyakkimaru ends up falling into the water below, where he finds all the people who have lost their faces in that place. He returns through some magical ropes controlled by the sculptor, but asks the warrior to give up. When Dororo questions why the sculptor continues to do this without considering the pain of others, he finally reflects on what he has done and rejects the spirit's request. The spirit then uses the sword to eliminate the servant. At that moment, Hyakkimaru takes the opportunity to climb onto the sword and strike the deformed face of the statue, which ends up hitting itself with the sword in an attempt to hit the warrior. Afterward, the sculptor asks to touch Dororo's face and says he is a wonderful child. After that, Okaka turns to dust. After this adventure, they finally reach the hot spring, where they encounter the blind priest again. Then, other children arrive and play in the water, and their father apologizes for their behavior. Suddenly, the other boys notice a drawing on Dororo's back that looks like a map, but the boy gets embarrassed and tells them to stop looking at his back. After leaving the hot spring, the old man realizes that the map only appears when Dororo's body is heated, but he doesn't know why because he had never taken a hot bath before. The boy then remembers that just before losing his mother, she shared a map on her own back, which hid his father's treasure. But that's only part of it. Dororo recalls that his mother said the other part would always be with him, and he would understand when he met someone he trusted. Since he was very young, he didn't understand anything and had already forgotten. Before leaving, the priest says they now have a range of options on what to do. He suggests they think about it because they can live peacefully if they find the treasure, or Hyakkimaru can continue to destroy Daigo's lands in exchange for his own body. They continue their journey until they encounter two strange creatures in the forest, one that looks like a ghostly woman and the other like a giant baby monster. Hyakkimaru sees that their auras are yellow and blue, meaning they are not demons. The ghostly woman disappears and the giant baby grabs Dororo, asking him to carry it. In the end, it's the monster that ends up carrying the boy until the three of them arrive at a destroyed temple. The ghostly woman appears again and points to the ground where Hyakkimaru finds oil, indicating that the temple must have been set on fire. The giant baby starts grabbing Dororo again, but disappears after a while when a mysterious man named Sabaim appears. He says it's dangerous to wander around at night because there's a ghost in this place. He leaves flowers at the temple's entrance and invites them to his house because he doesn't want them to be devoured. The man's gaze is eerie. Hyakkimaru senses a human aura, albeit with some red spots, and tells Dororo that he's not a monster, but he seems suspicious. After they eat, Dororo asks about the ghost's story. The man tells them that there used to be a convent in the temple, where a nun would take in orphan children and make them work. The woman was very cruel, and after a few years of work, she would even sell the poor children. Everything ended when lightning struck the temple, causing everyone inside to die. Sabaim says that he and the villagers regret not doing anything but still pray for the poor souls. Finally, the nun became the ghost that appears at night and devours travelers who pass by. At the host's request, Dororo and Hyakkimaru spend the night at his house, but the boy wakes up in the middle of the night with a giant caterpillar about to attack them. Hyakkimaru takes a while to wake up, but when he does, he immediately attacks the monster, which does everything to escape, but the warrior deals with this enemy easily. Suddenly, a larger monster in the shape of a butterfly with a completely red aura appears. She releases a strange powder to keep the two away and takes the caterpillar away. The next day, Hyakkimaru follows Mr. Sabaim to a place where they can see the whole village. Meanwhile, Dororo is investigating and finds a suspicious storage area. He invades the place but discovers that there is only rice inside. However, as he moves away, the boy stumbles upon a hidden hatch. When he opens the door, someone pushes him inside, and it turns out to be men who say that this is to protect the village. In the meantime, Sabaim tells Hyakkimaru that he was born and raised in this village and knows no other land, so he would do anything to protect this place. He then talks about the ghosts and says he won't let Hyakkimaru eliminate them. On the other hand, Dororo is in a dark place inside the trap until several caterpillars like the one from the previous night reveal themselves. At that moment, Sabaim is telling Hyakkimaru that the village went through terrible times with robberies and animal invasions, as well as plagues that disrupted the crops. This led people to steal from each other. It was during that chaos that Sabaim encountered the ghosts. They promised to protect the land in exchange for being able to live there. He agreed, and soon they devoured the thieves and beasts that invaded the village. Dororo, on the other hand, is running away from the creatures and ends up falling when he comes across human bones on the ground. However, a blue glow appears in the spot and the giant baby monster reappears. Outside, Hyakkimaru says he will continue to eliminate demons to get everything back. While in the trap, the baby says he will save Dororo because he is good. Ghosts come out of his head, scaring away the caterpillars, and show the boy what really happened at the temple. It was the villagers themselves who set fire to it, claiming it was for the good of the village. As he escapes with the ghosts, Hyakkimaru is attacked by the Mariposas that have just emerged from the cocoons, but he manages to defeat them easily. Then he knocks Sabaim down before being lifted high by another butterfly. He manages to free himself but falls unconscious. The creature loses control of its flight and crashes into a tower, where a lookout with a torch accidentally sets the structure on fire, and soon the fire spreads throughout the village. When Dororo finds Hyakkimaru and they see that the village is on fire, the boy tells him about the children's ghosts and how he also found oil in the storage. When the warrior tries to stand up, his left prosthetic breaks. With the information Dororo obtained from the ghosts, Hyakkimaru takes a boat and goes to the lake where the mother Mariposa reveals herself. He tries to attack her but is carried away. However, in the air, he releases the flammable oil and sets the creature on fire before falling into the water. Another statue in the Hall of Hell breaks and Hyakkimaru regains his spinal column. As they pass through the village again, everything is in ruins after the fire. Dororo wonders if it's their fault, but Hyakkimaru says it's not their problem. This makes the boy realize that the warrior only cares about killing demons, regardless of the consequences. He ends up taking a different path when he is found by a man named Itachi who recognizes him. He was his father's former partner. The man shows a map and says he knows that the other half is with the boy. He shows his back, revealing that there is no map, so Itachi deduces that the boy must have the map in his head. Thus, the group of bandits takes the boy with them. Later, they rest, and Itachi explains that he used to suspect the boss in the past. He saw the man taking something from the bandits' warehouse, and it seemed like he was taking valuable things. He kept an eye on the boss, hoping for a mistake, but the man never slipped up. Over time, Itachi gave up, thinking it was just paranoia. Much later, when he was working for the samurais, he found Dororo and his mother, and when he was out of money, he thought the two would be the only clue to the supposed treasure. Eventually, he found the woman's grave and unearthed it, finding the map on her back. This story infuriates Dororo, but he can't do anything because he's tied up. The next day, they continue their journey and find the island where the money is hidden, but they need to cross the water. The group comes across a small village completely destroyed and with signs of violence, but there's no one there. All the boats in the area are destroyed as well. Suddenly, a boy with no right arm appears and says he has some boats, but it will cost a price. With the promise to pay when they reach the island, Itachi and the others split into two boats, but there are no oars. Suddenly, the two vessels start sliding, being pulled by sharks that the boy considers as family. When he sees Dororo curious about the arm, the guy tells them he gave it to the fish when they were hungry, and now the creature's like people. The one-armed boy continued to feed them, but the sharks grew quite a bit, and now they can devour a whole village. So now we know what happened to the village back there. When Itachi realizes they are deviating from the island, he threatens the boy, but suddenly the guy says it's time for the sharks to eat. At that moment, the other boat is attacked, and no one survives. Itachi tries to attack the one-armed boy, but one of the sharks stops him. Out of nowhere, the armless guy climbs on one of the creatures and tells them not to eat everything at once and to save some for later, leaving one of the fish to guard while he moves away. When the bandits are practically giving up, Dororo scolds them, saying they are still alive, so they shouldn't act as if they already lost. The boy uses himself as an example, saying that he has faced many difficulties and almost died several times but kept moving forward. With this, Itachi gets excited, gives his speech no jutsu, and everyone listens to Dororo's plan. The boy acts as bait to lure the shark out of the water. After diving, he signals with the rope when the creature arrives. The men pull him and prepare to attack. When the fish emerges, they all use their swords to strike the monster's belly, which starts to float lifelessly. After that, they go to the island and take the shark with them. The one-armed boy follows the blood trail in the water and finds the dead fish when the bandits gather to punish him. After the guy takes a beating, Dororo intercedes for him because the guys wanted to repay the companions' lives in the same coin. So Itachi orders them to let the guy go in a certain place. Next, they still insist on the map, even though Dororo says he doesn't know where it is. Itachi concludes that if it's not on the boy's back, it could be somewhere else, so they strip everything from the boy, discovering that it's actually a girl, but they don't know why Dororo's father raised her as a boy. Unfortunately, they find out that near the fire, the map begins to appear and bring Dororo closer to the fire to complete the map. They continue their journey and leave the child tied behind. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru defeats the demon, saving the life of the man who raised him, Dr. Jukai. Soon the man realizes that Hyakkimaru has recovered part of his body but now looks more frightening. In a cave, he cleans the young man and realizes that his skin is now real and he can smile, hear, and speak, which amazes the man. While eating, Hyakkimaru reveals that he found his biological family and that his father is Lord Daigo Keijimitsu, who offered him to the demons. Then the guy asks for a new prosthesis, but Jukai refuses to give another one because he knows that Hyakkimaru will fight the demons to regain his body, and despite looking more human on the outside, he may be becoming less human on the inside, especially if he doesn't harm just apparitions. Suddenly, the rain causes a landslide and the cave's exit is blocked. Meanwhile, far away, Hyakkimaru's mother talks to Lord Daigo about the goddess she prayed to, whose statue lost its head when the boy was born. Now the woman understands that the goddess offered her own head to the demons, so one of the 12 couldn't get Hyakkimaru's head, which is why the child survived. Therefore, the woman knows that her son will regain his body, and the prosperity of these lands will end. While Hyakkimaru digs to open a passage, Jukai asks why he wants a human body so badly when it could even limit his abilities, and the guy replies that he wants it back because it's his. The man insists that Lord Daigo's people and his own family may try to stop him, and when he regains his body, he may be stained with human blood, which could leave him alone in the end. However, Hyakkimaru says that there is one person who won't leave him alone, which is Dororo. When they finally get out, Jukai says that if there's someone who will stand by Hyakkimaru's side, that person may be able to keep him human. Before leaving, the guy tries to ask the man's name because he never heard it when he was deaf. Jukai is reluctant to answer, but Hyakkimaru says he already knows what he is, so he calls the man Mom. The scene is funny, but touches the guy. After that, Hyakkimaru continues his journey and heads to the island where Dororo is. On the island, the one-armed bandit swears revenge and sends the remaining shark to devour them all. The creature looks sinister and approaches, splashing water everywhere. After feeding on the other shark, it looks much more monstrous and goes straight for Dororo, who is tied to a tree. Luckily, the creature doesn't hit the child right away, and Hyakkimaru suddenly appears to save Dororo. He recognizes that the creature is a demon, so a battle ensues. The warrior manages to get on top of the creature and delivers some blows until he jumps to deliver a precise blow to the head, eliminating the demon. Then he shows affection for Dororo and says he came to rescue his friend, leaving the boy touched. Suddenly, the guy falls, and now his left leg also grows back, meaning he didn't even need the prosthesis that Jukai denied him. Dororo then guides the warrior to reach the bandits. The problem is that both the bandits and the duo see Lord Daigo's samurai approaching in boats in the distance. They dock on the island under Tahomaru's command. Looking for a hiding place, Dororo and Hyakkimaru find Itachi's group. The leader has already taken an arrow in the shoulder. He still wants to get the treasure, but survival is more important at the moment. Unfortunately, while fleeing together, they are found by Tahomaru and his bodyguards. Soon, the two brothers prepare to fight, but Hyakkimaru is at a numerical disadvantage because Tahomaru isn't fighting alone. Meanwhile, Itachi separates from Dororo and the remaining bandits. In a moment of respite, with the warrior leaning against a tree, the bodyguard shoots an arrow into his back through the trunk. Tahomaru and the other bodyguard join forces and end up breaking Hyakkimaru's right blade. Itachi, on the other hand, loses the rest of his comrades and is now only with Dororo. When they stop near some Buddha stones, the bandit ends up being hit in the back, and after retaliating, he takes several more arrows. To make matters worse, the owner of the sharks appears up there and, to get revenge, detonates an absurd amount of explosives, causing a landslide that reaches the location of the fight between the brothers, thus ending the battle. Itachi and Dororo barely escape because they were at the entrance to the treasure cave. All Itachi can do is see the much-desired money before dying. Hyakkimaru finds the location, and Dororo says he still doesn't know how to use all that money, so he takes just enough to sustain themselves for now. Then the two leave by boat. Their next stop is at the village blacksmith to repair the blades. First, they meet his daughter, Okawa, and explain that they need repairs. However, Hyakkimaru does something strange. He rubs his forehead against hers to identify her through touch. This creates an awkward situation, but the girl ends up liking him. In the forge, they find funny masks, and the blacksmith asks what the swords have already cut. We know that he has cut many demons with them, so the blacksmith takes the blades to a temple for purification. However, no one notices a ghost performing some kind of conjuration that affects Hyakkimaru. Later, Okawa says she wants to marry Hakimaru, and he oddly confirms that he wants it to, saying that he will abandon the search for his body and stay in that village. He even says he doesn't need Dororo's company. What's even stranger is that Dororo, despite being annoyed, keeps saying that he's very happy for the couple and that they are made for each other. The next day, Dororo realizes that things have been strange since they visited the temple. Meanwhile, Okawa is trying to drag the guy to the wedding, but he keeps saying things that make no sense. In the temple, Dororo finds the ghost up there and hits it with a stone. When the newlyweds arrive, the boy explains what happened, that Hakimaru is still affected by the creature's magic and ends up attacking his friend. Okawa tries to stop him, but the chaos is only resolved when the blacksmith knocks down the ghost with a blow. The two friends make up, and the blacksmith tells a legend about this ghost being trapped in the temple, but doesn't know how it escaped. With that, the creature is imprisoned again in a statue, and only now Okawa understands that Hakimaru was saying the opposite of what he meant, and then he didn't want to get married after all. The plays become much better after the blacksmith's work, and Hakimaru likes the result. Before they leave, Okawa tells him not to rub his forehead on other people anymore, but the guy still doesn't understand the reason. On the way to find a monster, Dororo and Hakimaru stop to talk when they are approached by another warrior who says he's also going to face the creature. On the way, he introduces himself as Saburota and says he's been trying to kill the creature for 6 months but only managed to get a big scar on his chest. He tells them that the monster devoured his mother, and that's why he wants revenge. When they find the monster, we see that it has various characteristics of different animals, resembling a type of chimera from Greek mythology. Hakimaru recognizes it as a demon and goes after it, but he also needs to keep Dororo safe because the creature's tail is a snake. Suddenly, Saburota tries to attack them and reveals that after losing his mother to this monster, the only thing that fills the void in his chest is seeing people screaming in despair before being devoured. What a crazy guy. When Hakimaru dodges an attack, the weight ends up breaking part of the rock and both fall off the cliff. Down below, Dororo gets his arms stuck between the rocks, and to make matters worse, water is flowing from the spring, creating a pool in the area. Hakimaru tries everything but can't help his friend. When Dororo starts to panic because of the danger of drowning, the priest conveniently appears and uses the blade to dislodge the rock and save the boy, but the sword ends up breaking in the process. Hakimaru immediately returns to face the monster, and Saburota doesn't understand why the warrior isn't afraid. Seeing him in action, he remembers how he couldn't protect his mother. When the creature is about to flee, he knocks down Hakimaru and says he wanted to be like him, but that it's too late. Then he offers himself to the demon, which regenerates, becomes stronger, gains wings, and even has a part resembling Saburota's face. When Dororo arrives at the scene, he sees that his friend has already torn the monster apart and is now retrieving the part that belonged to Saburota. Just like the Phantom Fox before, he now doesn't receive any part of his body back. Dororo then goes crazy and continues attacking, demanding the return of his body. Afterward, he stops and says he will go to Daigo to reclaim his body. Dororo takes the prosthetic arms, and the priest stays behind as they continue on their way. Meanwhile, Daigo's lands are suffering more and more. Some villages are being affected by epidemics, and Daigo orders them to be burned before the disease spreads. Additionally, the rival clan Asakura is gathering an army to attack, and Daigo's men are not enough to defend, as many of them are ill. Sometime later, Daigo also receives news that Hakimaru is approaching and he will arrive in a few days in this territory. However, the Asakura clan's attack will happen first. Tahamaru, who was listening to the conversation, offers to go after his brother. He just needs his 2 bodyguards. Knowing that his son is determined, Daigo allows it. Days later, Hakimaru and Dororo pass through a chasm where apparently many people have fallen when suddenly an arrow shatters the man's left prosthetic arm. Tahamaru and the bodyguards are already there. Dororo tries to prevent Hakimaru from attacking his own brother, but he doesn't listen. The two approach and begin a balanced fight despite the numerical advantage of Tahamaru and his guards. The woman hits the other prosthetic, but Hakimaru quickly reaches her and hits her arm. Then he also cuts the other man's arm and returns to face his brother. The sword fight continues fiercely until Hakimaru manages to make a small cut on his brother's forehead. Before they continue, an arrow with explosives separates the two. Other men from Daigo appear, and their leader sends a horse with explosives in Hakimaru's direction, causing an explosion that knocks him into the abyss. A soldier takes Dororo hostage while the leader explains that they are there to ensure Tahamaru returns alive by orders of his father. Tahamaru doesn't care about that, so the man knocks him out with a tranquilizer. After everyone leaves, it starts to rain, and at the bottom of the abyss, Hakimaru struggles to get up. Some armor pieces with orange auras start approaching him, while the horse also reassembles itself with a golden aura. Dororo is trapped in a cage until after some time, Hyakkimaru's mother appears and sets him free, taking advantage of the distraction of everyone in the palace due to the war. Sometime later, far from there, a group of soldiers is hit by a tornado caused by the white fiery horse and its rider, Hyakkimaru himself. He advances insanely, attacking everything and everyone. Meanwhile, Tahamuro's bodyguard named Mutsu, besides having lost her arm, is also sick. She goes alone to the Hall of Hell and tries to make a deal with the demon that didn't get a part of Hyakkimaru. She offers herself in his place to help Daigo's lands and people. At this moment, Tahamuro and her other bodyguard, who is her brother, arrive. The woman doesn't want to give up on the deal, but the demon doesn't accept it. However, the three realize that the pact can only be completed with Hyakkimaru's body, and something happens in the Hall of Hell with the three of them inside. Hyakkimaru continues the massacre, demanding that they return Dororo. After eliminating the last man, he advances on the horse until he finds Tahamuro's trio. The bodyguards somehow regain their arms, and the boy got 2 extra eyes in the absence of one. Soon, Hyakkimaru realizes that they have his eyes and arms, and the confrontation begins. Hyakkimaru's mother arrives at the scene with Dororo, and the priest arrives as well. He prevents Dororo from advancing because Hyakkimaru might not recognize him at the moment, making it too risky. Suddenly, a white foal appears and some men follow it. The fiery horse is with a man on the ground when it sees the foal. It turns out that this horse is actually a mare and the foal's mother. Unfortunately, this distraction causes her to be hit by the enemies. However, furious, the creature bites the man's head and throws it up in the air while delivering a powerful kick to the woman. The headless body still gets up for one last attack, and the woman also throws her own sword before falling to the ground. Tahamuro becomes desperate and leaves Hyakkimaru aside for a moment. The mare nuzzles the foal affectionately before finally falling and transforming back. With both bodyguards dead, Hyakkimaru finally regains his arms, and now only his eyes are missing. He returns to the fight, now holding the blades with his hands without caring about the pain. When he finally senses the presence of his mother, along with Dororo, Hyakkimaru becomes confused and runs away, and his brother follows him. When Tahamuro catches up with him, Hyakkimaru already has his hands bandaged to hold onto the blades firmly. The fight is still balanced, but Tahamuro now realizes that having regained his arms, his brother has a better range in his attacks. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru starts running, and it's Hyakkimaru who chases him now. At this moment, we also see Jukai arriving at this place. What a coincidence! Tahamuro lures his brother into the family's palace. They resume their fight, and the guy reveals that he brought him to this enclosed place to make it more difficult for him since he just got his arms back and has a greater reach. Moreover, while a candle sets the floor on fire, he says he wants to eliminate him in the same place where he was born. In the distance, the others spot the fire, so Dororo rushes to find his friend, while Hyakkimaru's mother also decides to go there because both of them are her sons. As the fight continues, Hyakkimaru asks why his brother misses something when he lived there his whole life and had everything. Tahamuro mentions the bodyguards and also his mother before lunging at his opponent, and the two fall to the lower floor. He now uses the same ability to see a person's soul, and the fight continues. Meanwhile, outside, Dororo finds the priest helping Hyakkimaru's mother descend into a well, following a secret passage. On the other side, she encounters Jukai, who recognizes her as Hyakkimaru's mother because their faces are similar. Upstairs, the brothers continue their intense fight, both seeing each other's souls until Hyakkimaru corners his opponent but hesitates at the last moment. Instead of killing his brother, he only breaks his sword. When Tahamuro questions the reason, Hyakkimaru says he doesn't know but realizes that they are both the same. They are both humans. Convinced now, Tahamuro realizes that he was under the influence of the demon all this time and that it still wants to fulfill the contract. The young man decides to return his eyes to his brother, which disappear into his hands. In the distance, Dororo doesn't want to stand still and asks the priest to wait for a moment. Suddenly, a demonic structure opens a hole in the palace floor, and Hyakkimaru jumps to destroy the structure with a double blow from the blades. Afterward, he starts floating and descends to the ground while recovering his eyes, screaming in pain. At this moment, Tahamuro collapses, exhausted, while his mother and Jukai arrive. The one hugs her son and says she should never have let them take him. Jukai in turn gives her a statuette goddess and says that Hyakkimaru must live, but as a human, not a demon. Outside, Dororo screams for the guy, and they direct him to the passage. Before leaving, Hyakkimaru opens his eyes, and the first thing he sees is his mother's. Outside, he falls and receives help from Dororo. Then the woman goes to Tahamuro and apologizes for making him feel so alone, but promises to stay by his side forever. Through the well, the priest helps the two climb up, while Hyakkimaru comments that the sky is beautiful and Dororo agrees. On the front lines of the war, Dago receives news of the fire and the disappearance of his wife and son, but all he does is continue forward to defeat the Asakura clan's army. We then see that the last statue in the Hall of Demons has also broken. Days later, Dororo talks to some villagers about rebuilding the domain as their own country, independent of the samurais. When the men question the idea, Dororo says there is plenty of hidden money, and they can start the plan after retrieving the gold. Meanwhile, Hyakkimaru encounters Daigo in the Hall of Hell. They discuss whether the man is guilty of the suffering of the lands, and he shows no remorse for the pact he made, saying he would do it again if he could. Hyakkimaru then takes a sword, but the scene cuts to the priest going to talk to Dororo. They talk about Hyakkimaru not having returned yet, and the old man says the guy may have embarked on another journey because he has just been born, not because he has regained his body, but his heart and mind. Now he has to abandon the bloody path and return to the world of men. In the Hall of Hell, Hyakkimaru thrusts the sword into Daigo's helmet instead of attacking his father. He says that the path he has chosen does not lead in that direction as he places the statue on the ground because he is human, not a demon. When the sun leaves, Lord Daigo reflects on whether, if he hadn't made that pact, the prosperity he wanted so much could have come from Hyakkimaru. The anime ends with Hyakkimaru following his own path while Dororo promises to wait for his friend because he knows he will come back. The period of civil wars approaches in this region, but even so, the bald priest believes that the future holds something very good for these two young men.